This is the Pilatus PC-7 Mk.ll, the Swiss-made tuition master that's been teaching Indian Air Force cadets which way is up since 2013. It arrived just in time to save the day after the previous trainer, the HPT-32, decided to be more of a static display than a flying machine. 75 of these were ordered by the Indian Air Force from Switzerland and were deployed at the Air Force Academy in Donegal, where they endure the terrifying landings of first-time pilots from the Air Force, ensuring that the Navy and Coast Guard pilots are also given their fair share of scare. It's basically the driver's edition car of the skies, but with a turboprop and a glass cockpit that's likely cleaner than your actual car. Since its induction, it's boosted training hours by 200%, meaning that cadets now get 14 solo sorties to figure out where the runway is rather than just one. Anyway, enough blabbering, let's get on with the build. So this build does not begin where 99% of the builds usually begin, which is in the cockpit interiors. It rather starts with prepping up the canopy, so I began working on that. I used Tamiya fine and finished compounds in succession and buffed the canopy with a cotton Q-tip. And later on cleaned with a tissue paper and washed it off. And then dipped it into Future for a glass-like shine. Once dry, I followed up by masking. Since the canopy is a single piece with a clear indentation of the split frame in the center, it was easy to mask it, and I used Tamiya masking tape for the purpose of masking. Now, I've tried so many Indian brands of masking tapes, but there is nothing that comes even half as close to the Tamiya masking tape, and this is a product I highly recommend for any modeler to have in their bag of supplies. The seat headrest has this kind of funny bunny look, and so I did attach it to the lower part using super glue. But there is a very nasty ejection pin mark that needed thorough cleanup, so I used a special cutter to rip through the ejector pin marking. There is a channel on the rear bulkhead of both seats which allows the seat to fix in. However, the ejector pin mark had to be cut so that the seat could fit in properly. And if one seat wasn't the issue, CoPro ensured that both the seats have the same problem. And so I had to do the same task multiplied by 2. After spending some considerable amount of time shaping and sanding that channel, the two seats finally fit nicely inside the cockpit, and this was a pain to get through. I then moved on to the assembly of the rest of the cockpit inside the fuselage halves. The fuselage halves have no locator pins, however a dry test fit of the fuselage half shows the fit to be pretty seamless. That's definitely a good job done by CoPro. After priming the interiors of the cockpit and the cockpit floor with a generic grey primer, I moved on to the painting of the cockpit. I used Camlin Grey and a new shade of leaf green that I recently purchased. These were mixed in an eyeballed ratio with water and a drop of IPA and painted with my Sparmax airbrush at 40 psi. The interior detailing is good, and it was accented with Tamiya Panaline accent color. Once the wash had sat there for about 10 minutes, I then used a cotton Q-tip to clean up the excess and leave the wash in the cracks and crevices, and that gave quite a depth to the interiors of the cockpit. I then used a black Sharpie to detail the headrests of the two seats. At this point, I decided to make it a wheels down version, so I put in the seat belt decals. These were slightly oversized, but they conformed nicely to the seat surface nonetheless, and it gave quite a depth to the overall look of the seats inside the cockpit. The cockpit floor assembly was then fixed inside the fuselage halves, and I closed up the fuselage halves, and I found that there was a gap in the upper fitment of the fuselage halves, whereas the lower portion fit pretty nicely. And this would have to be addressed at a later stage with filler, definitely. I then started working on the wings, and at this point I used Revell contactor to attach the upper portion or upper parts of the wing to the lower parts of the wing. And again, I had to figure out where the upper part would fix correctly or align with the lower portion, because it's a bummer there are no locator pins here. Right then, the kit comes with these wing root attachments for each wing. At the outset, I must say it was a total pain in the backside to attach them, and once I was very confident that I had fit them properly, the bloody fuselage wouldn't fit. So I had to sand off a significant portion of these assemblies, but to no avail, only to realize later that in the Indian PC-7s, this feature isn't present at all. It's rather a smooth wing root. So I had to pry it out after having stuck them with super glue, and that was another task that I burdened myself with unnecessarily. That's why the experts say, research the subject before you build. Silly me. So then, as per the instructions, I fixed the wing from the underside, and it doesn't align. Now, the wing had to be cut and sanded from the back to make it fit appropriately within the slot given inside the fuselage assembly. And here you can see that now, after all that cutting and shaping, it would need a lot of filler. I did away with these wing root assemblies and began filling in the rest of the fuselage. And as you can see here, there is putty that was used to construct the smooth wing roots. There is filler on the nose and behind the cockpit, and even on the underside of the wings where I made the corrections. Alright, the good part with this kit is that this gives you two different rudder shapes. Now, the difference between the PC-7 and the PC-7 Mark II is in the shape of the rudder. The length and height are different on the PC-7 Mark II, and thankfully that rudder is included with the kit. Alright, under the hood, or rather the cowling, sits the Pratt & Whitney PT-6A25C turboprop. The Swiss put in everything from crop dusters to executive commuters and derated to 700 shaft horsepower, which is Swiss for we gave it plenty of power, but let's not get the cadets too excited. Why make things simple when you can make them Swiss? Cheese. Okay, anyway, PJs aside, it was time to lay down some paint. And so I first primed the entire aircraft body with Bosnic grey primer, and then laid down a generic white acrylic paint over the entire body, and then masked off the various sections of the aircraft. For this purpose, I used Camlin Crimson Red paint. Again, this is a new paint that I got, and just to mention here, I am now replacing my Fevicryl paints. I've been using Fevicryl for almost a decade now, so I thought I will replace them with Camlin paints. As you can see, it's laying down pretty nicely over the entire body. And once the red paint was done, I then moved on to Camlin Cerulean Blue. Now this is again exactly the same color as the Fevicryl ones that I'm using. But I've noticed that in the Camlin paints, the paints lay down pretty flat, which is what I want. The Fevicryl paints actually used to lay down pretty glossy, and then it used to take a considerable amount of time to get that gloss off The way I used to do that was to add some talcum powder into the Fevicryl paint to cut off the gloss. But here with Camlin paints, they lay down pretty flat, as you can see here, and so that made the job that much more easier for me. I'm using my Sparmax airbrush and I'm spraying at 40 psi from a distance of about 4 to 5 inches away, and you can see that the paint is laying down pretty nicely. Right then, it was time to reap the fruits of labour. Well, that actually sounds like I'm buying some fruits from a fruit seller named Labour in a fairy tale Arabic story. But anyway, here you can see me removing all the masking that I had done, and it was pretty satisfying to see all those cheat lines come out really well as per my expectations. It's just on the right side of the rudder that a little bit of white paint got peeled off with the tape itself, but I was able to rectify it later on during the touch-up phase. And here you can see me removing the masking from the canopy, and finally even the overall paint job on the canopy has also turned out pretty nice as per my expectations. And so I then removed the canopy off because I had just lightly stuck it to the airframe just so that I should be able to remove it later on. The prop, which comes in 5 different pieces, was painted in bright chrome. This bright chrome paint is from a company called Cube, and it is a spray can, so it was pretty easy. I just sprayed on that color on the entire prop. I then moved on to the final step of polishing and shining the canopy. I dipped it once again in Future so that the glass-like shine persists on the already shiny canopy. Right, so coming to the final step of decaling or decaling, I used Bright Spark decals, and these conform nicely to the surface. I was skeptical about these lasting because I've had these decals with me for almost a decade now, but in my last few builds these decals have almost disintegrated, but this time I was able to outsmart the decal behavior, and instead of dipping it in warm water, I dipped them in normal cold water, and they behaved the hell out of themselves. Of course, these smaller round decals have a very small green round which needs to be separately put in the center of the decals, but I did away with those and I used my acrylic green paint pen instead to paint the inner green circle in that decal. And since I had decided to go wheels down this time on this build, I then attached the 3 undercarriage landing gears, which were painted separately off camera, and I don't have the video of painting them here because it doesn't really make sense. The nose gear bay door covers come with 2 notches right in the center of those covers. These are supposed to help you to align and fit them, but they are more interferences rather than helping agents. So I just cut them off, and congratulations, we have a tail sitter. Not a really happy and satisfying sight. Now this is despite the fact that I had stuffed in a lot of weight initially inside the nose. That is not part of the instructions, but we have a tail sitter and there was no other way I could add in any more weight. So the only solution was to have a stand constructed, and I did that with this transparent piece of plastic. I just cut it out to shape to be able to support the tail of the aircraft. And so finally, here we are on the rotating disc of glory as usual. Pilatus PC-7 Mk.ll from Air Force Academy, Donegal. My 2 cents, or rather 2 pieces of advice with this kit would be: 1, I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner, considering that you need a lot of reconstruction with putty. Now, there are two different kinds of kits available even for the PC-9. There is one a PC-9 Part 2 and there is one a PC-9M Part 2. I've got both kits, but I have used the PC-9M Part 2 here. Now I'm not sure how the other kit will fare. In due course, of course, I will build that one as well in a similar scheme. So we'll see how that fares, but this is the only kit available that comes closest to the Indian PC-7 Mark II, of course, with the scratch-built reconstructions on the airframe that are required. The other reason why I wouldn't recommend this kit for a beginner is because it requires a lot of weight inside the nose. I had actually stuffed in the nose to the best of what I could, but it still ended up being a tail sitter, and that was a real bummer in this kit in the end. Of course, I enjoyed painting the paint scheme of the PC-7 Mark II. It's a great paint scheme, very attractive, very colorful paint scheme, considering that most Indian Air Force aircraft, even the training ones, are nearly all in the Tiffany's gray paint scheme. This one comes as a colorful surprise. Well, and that's enough to make a cadet happy that he's flying a colorful toy in the skies. So before I end, I think it would be noteworthy to do a quick comparison of the two kits that are available in the market to construct a PC-7 Mark II of the Indian Air Force. So as you know, that there are these two kits that are available in the market for construction of a PC-7. The one that you see right here is the Planet Models PC-7 kit. Now, this kit basically does not fit the requirements of a PC-7 Mark II because you will need a lot of structural changes. Majorly, those changes would be in the nose and the canopy area, and those structural changes are so many that it ultimately ends up becoming a totally new aircraft. The only way to go about reverse engineering the PC-7 Mark II would be to take the base kit as the KP Pilatus PC-9M kit. So let's look at the differences between the PC-7 and the PC-7 Mark II. The first major difference is in the nose section. Right, so the first difference that you will notice is in the length of the nose. There are some folks who believe that the length of the nose in the PC-7 is shorter than that in the PC-7 Mark II or PC-9. Now, because this is a PC-9 kit, I think the length of the nose here is apt for a PC-7 Mark II. So there's no need to, extend that nose. The only other difference, apart from the length of the nose, is in the structure of the exhaust cowlings here. As you can see in the PC-7 Mark II and PC-9, the exhaust nozzles have a slight, wedge type of arrangement at the back here, through which the exhaust gases escape. Whereas in the PC-7, this is just like a straight piece of pipe. So this wedge is not present in the PC-7. Now, because this is a PC-9 kit modified into a PC-7 Mark II, so it retains the wedge shape at the end of the exhaust pipe. Another feature here in the nose is, this little round mark. I don't know what that is, but I think this is also for the escape of exhaust gases or something. This feature is not present in the PC-7, but it is present in the PC-7 Mark II and the PC-9M. The second major difference is in the wing roots of the two aircraft. As you can see, this is the PC-7 Mark II, so which has a smoother, wing root. So that's the difference between a PC-7 Mark II and a PC-9, that the PC-7 Mark II will retain the wing structure of the older PC-7. The third major difference is in the canopy structure. So the length of the canopy in the PC-7 Mark II is kind of longer than what it is in the PC-7, original PC-7. Now the original PC-7 canopy is not as curved as you see here in the PC-7 Mark II. Now, because this is a PC-9M kit, it retains the same structure if you're constructing it into a PC-7 Mark II. So the canopy kind of retains the same structure of the PC-9 in the PC-7 Mark II. And the fourth difference is in the construction of the rudder. So this kind of retains the tail structure of the PC-9M, and as you can see, it's got two wedge-like constructions here. So one starts right here, I can say roughly at the mid chord of the leading edge of the rudder here. So this is the first, you can say, a triangular structure, and this is the second triangular structure, which starts right here at the end of it and continues right up to here, to a little distance behind the canopy. Now, whereas in the PC-7, you will find that the tail, actually the leading edge of the rudder, comes right down here, and from here where you see the white cheat line here, so this triangular feature kind of extends from here right into the fuselage, and there is no further extension of that feature. So the PC-7 rudder kind of ends right here where the middle of this these two triangular structures is in the PC-7 Mark II. And the final difference is, of course, in these fins. These fins were scratch built for this particular build, and there are two of those, one on each side of the rudder, as you can see here. So this is a feature that is present on the PC-7 Mark II and also on the PC-9, some PC-9s, whereas the PC-7s do not have this kind of a tail structure here. Now there is another antenna at the bottom of this. I have not yet put that. That will be the final nail in the coffin for the PC-7 Mark II. So thank you very much for sticking together this far. I am sure you must have enjoyed this extremely detailed build and analysis of the PC-9M kit converted into the Indian Air Force PC-7 Mark II. If you enjoyed this video, I would definitely recommend you click the like button and do consider subscribing to the channel so that I can bring in more of such detailed content for you. And honestly, I would like to hear your feedback on how you liked this super detailed review of the kit and the build process. Till the next time then, Swing Wing Singh signing off, leaving you with these pictures. Bye bye, take care.